So I'd just like to actually end that with NVIDIA. And it'd be interesting to see if some of them can jump in the comments to see where are you guys going with an end-to-end cloud native suites of AI data and analytics software. Because obviously we think about NVIDIA as just producing the chips.
I mean, they've got a massive software stack. They are extremely comprehensive in terms of a software stack, which
So
comes along for the ride with the hardware, but it's a very comprehensive.
it does. And what I think is interesting about NVIDIA, when I look at, for example, their demos and their research reports for a lot of stuff they do, particularly in the kind of game animation space, incredibly cutting edge.
Yeah.
So I think why these guys, because of their DNA and their genesis, where they might have an edge is on the real kind of cutting edge stuff, which we tend to think on the AI space a lot of Google because they have more R&D PhDs than the rest of the university enterprise put together. But NVIDIA always comes up with really interesting kind of cutting edge stuff. So I'm interested to just follow on that. So I pull this in just kind of the last minute one, because this is something I will be keeping an eye on just to see what they're doing, because they always come up with something interesting.
Mhm. What I think is super interesting about NVIDIA is they really are this AI infrastructure based layer. And so they are providing at the very foundational level, really high performance compute and storage. And it's optimized. It says right there, optimized for AI, but that can mean a lot of things. It's marketing speak. But then they've got all of the AI tooling on top. So they've got, ML platforms, and you can see a little diagram of all their tools. But if you're building a complex, autonomous vehicle research, you're doing any of these kinds of things, you have a bunch of their hardware in there, and you're using a bunch of their stack in order to build your applications. And you mentioned Google. Well, Google has a lot of NVIDIA in their data centers, and so does Amazon, and so does Microsoft. And you can actually go to, let's say, Amazon and turn on your NVIDIA chip, instances, and you can drive some of your training loads or your inference, production inference loads onto the NVIDIA chips from your Amazon account. It's pretty crazy. So they're essentially, you're accessing their GPUs, and then Google came along and they're like, wow, these are really great. We think we can do something interesting. So they built their TPUs, their tensor processing units, which are kind of the same idea. But this whole space, Samba Nova is another one in this space. There are a lot of companies with a lot of funding jumping in to build really purpose specific hardware. Qualcomm's doing a ton of interesting things in this space, more for the mobile. So edge, edge chips in smartphones and things like that.
That's interesting.
There's a lot of really cool stuff happening in space.
This is an interesting recommendation for a lot of the companies I work with, advising deep tech AI startups. Not exactly my area, but I tend to advise them mainly on their enterprise strategy. But I'm working with a number of companies, and they all have a component of deep technology. A lot of it's hardware, and a lot of it requires optimization. A lot of their value proposition is because they can do something faster and cheaper. And those are the kind of people that run on these kind of systems, because this is really cutting edge. I mean, this enterprise architecture they've put here is a world away from this very high level diagram that Snowflake's doing. Obviously, Snowflake has probably something sufficient.
They have something similar at that level.
But they're not pitching at those people. If you look at this, you can tell who they're pitching at. Somebody who understands what NVIDIA toolkit is, somebody that understands what a tensor is. Your enterprise manager doesn't know what that is.
They're selling to the hardcore engineering leaders.
Your business that's trying to optimize something where that optimization is what actually makes the business. These are the guys that want to run on this level of innovation. And they're the kind of people I think this really, really can appeal to. And I think that's where I like what they do, because again, they bring something new to the table.
It's a super interesting space. And I think what's interesting is about all the stories we talked about today, just to wrap up, because I think we're at the end of the session, but I think is that all this stuff overlaps, right? To summarize all of this. Yes, you have the big cloud players. They would love to lock you in and just say, just use our stack, just use our compute storage hardware database, and then just program with our services and all that. And that will work for some folks. Other folks say, well, I want to work across multiple of those, or I want to do data warehouse, but I don't want to go with Amazon's version. I'm going to go with more of a universal version like a Snowflake. So I'm going to build my data lakes, my data warehouse with a Snowflake, which means I can sort of move it around if I ever choose to do so to other cheaper infrastructure, or, for whatever reason you want to move it. And then, but they're tied, right? Snowflake is like a frenemy or co-opetitor with those cloud providers. Then you've got the ML platform companies, which again are running on those clouds and competing with those cloud players, machine learning platforms themselves. So there's some co-opetition there, or competition there, I should say. And then you've got the sort of,
is that a word?
What's that?
Co-opetition.
Co-opetition is definitely a word. That's more competition directly for which platform are you going to use. And then you get the sort of the Salesforces and the SAPs that say, hey, we're sprinkling AI. And again, nothing wrong with it, because if you could solve a problem by using an AI-based function in your Salesforce app, great. That's faster than trying to build a model. So I think it's what's interesting about all of that, and then tying together this piece, the hardware acceleration companies, SambaNova, NVIDIA, there are a bunch more. You mentioned a startup in this space. They're way down at the bottom saying, we're going to build all this optimized, super fast hardware, custom built, purpose specific built to make this rest of this stack faster. So it's a very integrated and very interesting and rapidly evolving ecosystem. Excellent. It's also helpful for me to think about all these companies and go, well, how do they relate? And what is that relationship? So yeah, hopefully this was useful to somebody else as well, but it was even helpful to me.
I think the other key point is how it's all maturing. So you've got to constantly keep on top of it, because it's changing. So it's always important to look at not just where they are today, but what are the trajectories? Where is it all going? And what does that mean for me as a business? Essentially, how does it make my life easier?
Right. And how do we future-proof ourselves? Which of these vendors do we pick, and why? And are we locked in? And if we're locked in, and that's okay, we're making that conscious decision to lock into one or not. And how do we build that over time? And that's a whole other set of conversations. So we'll have to wrap for today, but thanks, Ian. That was fun. And for everybody who's watching, hopefully you're still here. If you enjoyed this episode, then please, the usual, know how the internet works. If you can like it, comment, share it, do all those things. That really helps us out.
Comments.
Yeah, throw comments in. That would be great. We'll respond. And I guess we'll see you all on the next episode. Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye.